Okay, good day. My name is Ray Blaze, and we're here today. We're going to be talking about the history of the Stepperettes. Before we do that, I have a little promo here I'd like to make in support of the Des Moines Catholic Worker House Fund Incorporated, also known as the Friends of Catholic Worker. We're a nonprofit that supports the humanitarian and needs of the inner city community in Des Moines, homeless and low income population. We basically provide all of the food that's like Worker House currently, which is 3,000 meals a month. We're incurring expenses of about $4,000 a month, and so we're fundraising. And if you're listening to this and enjoy the podcast, send us a check at Post Office Box 1386, Ankeny, Iowa 50021, or go to our webpage, friendsofcatholicworker.com, and there's a PayPal option. This afternoon, we're going to be hearing from five individuals who were involved with the Stepperettes. Uh, First, we have Maxine Palmer Flaherty, Mary Hooker Stearns, Scott Stearns, Paula Placencia, and Kathy Duncan Foggia. And I guess, Maxine, I'm told that you perhaps go back the furthest with the Stepperettes.
I guess I do.
Can you give us a little background about how the Stepperettes got organized and who was responsible and a little something about the early days?
Okay, well, Virginia Volcano was her name, and she took Ton from Richard Cree, and they always would chit chat back and forth about drill team. And so long story short, she asked him to visit with some girls at the academy, and they started out as a little corps. And I think her first performance was in 1959, and it just took off from there.
And when you say took off, originally how many young women were involved?
Hmm, probably, what do you think, Kathy? 30 maybe?
I think it probably was about 30. I think there were maybe 24 in the.
To begin with,
Mhm.
and then they just built on that.
Yeah.
And the drum team, was that all part of the original design? Or was that how?
No,
They had
no.
drummers until 60. I know they had them in 61.
60 or 61, I think,
Mhm.
was the first year that they had a drum line.
And they only had about three drummers and a couple glockenspiel players.
Glockenspiel, yeah. 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 And it really helped with the cadence for us. So, yeah, it was a great addition.
And then it ran through the middle 60s as a St. Joseph's Academy program
Until 1966.
till 1966. And,
Mhm.
and then you're in need of sponsorship, apparently.
We did.
And American Republic Insurance
Yes.
uh, became the sponsor for about 6 or 8 years.
Something like that.
Yeah, it was actually only about 3 years. And then in late 69, early 70, it just became the Des Moines Stepperettes for a couple of years. And then it reassociated with Dowling in 72, and it was known as the Dowling Stepperettes for about 4 years. And then for the rest of the run, it was just the Des Moines Stepperettes again.
And it became a citywide. Was that after 66?
Yeah, it was the fall of 65 and the year of 66, which is that's how I got involved. I'm not a Des Moines alumni, but in 65, they'd had an all-girl drum line. An all-girl drum line. They tried that, and then some of those girls graduated, and they decided when they needed the sponsorship from American Republic to go all city. And at that time, they um, also opened up the drum line to guys from anywhere in the area.
And where did you go to high school, Scott?
I was in the first graduating class from Hoover
Oh, good.
in 1969.
Okay. Um, well, along the way, there were some memorable accomplishments. And reviewing some of the materials that Mary provided to me, looks like you were on the road quite a bit. Is there a
We traveled a lot.
Mary, why don't you talk?
Group of that age, or,
Tell us about that.
back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, yeah. I mean, we were just talking about it in the car. We went to Philadelphia, Dallas, Washington, D.C., South Milwaukee many times, Chicago, Detroit, L.A. There were a lot. And a lot of the stuff was in the Midwest, too, during the winters. But in the summers, we did these bigger trips.
Bus trips mainly?
All bus
All
trips.
bus trips.
Yeah.
Except during the fall. The fall was, summer was practice and competition. So every June we would go to, or every July we'd go to Milwaukee for regional. And then August was the big national. But in the fall was when basketball season started. That's when we would perform at basketball games. And also the big highlight was performing at the girls' state basketball during halftime. And of course, everybody remembers us when we would march, but mainly doing the Iwo Jima. And then in the spring, it was kind of like a little bit of downtime practicing and getting ready for everyday practice during the
lot of
summer.
parades. Lots and lots of parades.
Drake, Pella,
4 or 5 of them on the 4th of July. Yeah, a lot of parades.
Visha.
How
Yeah.
much time was involved, as an extracurricular activity? Did you practice every day?
For 2 nights a week, if I remember right, and like a lot of Saturdays. Every other Saturday, maybe. I don't think it was every Saturday, but it was 2 nights a week, year round. And in the summers, it was every day,
Okay.
getting ready for these competitions. And it was a different show. You had basketball show, then you had the parade stuff, and then you had the football field stuff. And so it was a whole different program. So you had to learn a whole different thing each
Different
season.
routine. Yes. The competition routine was the summer.
Yeah, and that was on the football field.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And if you didn't practice right, you had to run the track.
Yeah.
Every practice started, it was very physical. I don't think people get it. Every practice started with running laps or running the track. And then they ended with that. And then if you talked too much or you really screwed up, you had to go run a lap.
Mhm.
And if you went too slow, they'd make you run faster.
The parades were grueling, though, so
The
you
parade
want
was
us to stay in
huge,
shape.
just be in shape. The parades were, sometimes it's 3 miles, 2 or 3 times a day, and you're marching in those boots and
The heat.
the heat. And we had
The blisters.
little uniforms with silk shirts. I mean, it was hot.
In fact, the first time we ever performed or we ever competed on AstroTurf was when we went to Dallas, Texas, because all this time we were only used to regular ground, and we were in the Cotton Bowl competing, and we were on AstroTurf, and we were not used to the heat. And so as we're going along with our competition and doing our routine, some of my corps mates would pass out.
It was hot on that field.
It was out because we're wearing satin blouses and broadcloth uniforms, and we're wearing black and black leather boots and retaining the heat. So
Obviously, Paula is younger than I am. I didn't get to march on AstroTurf. Anyway, it's cute. Back in my day, Mr. Cree always gave us a copy of where we were going. And one of the parades said Mediapolis. We interpret it as Minneapolis. So we were really excited because we didn't get to go to the places they went. And so we were so excited. Mr. Cree said, "What are you so excited about? It's a Podunk town." But we enjoyed it. We always enjoyed it.
In
Well,
later
Midwest.
years, we actually marched a parade in Jamaica. Gets up northeast of Des Moines a little bit.
We went everywhere.
But there were some memorable appearances. If I read the material correctly, you were in a couple different inaugural parades.
We were in we were in one after it went all city. We were invited to Kennedy's inauguration parade, and or yeah, I think it was
Kennedy would have been 61.
and
John
Johnson's,
Johnson was in 65.
right. But we didn't have funding back then,
And the
and
sisters.
the sisters,
The sisters were against it.
And they were against it because they were raising money for
For the
for the
school.
school,
Yeah.
so they didn't want us raising money for something else.
Well, let's talk about St. Joe's a little bit. In those days, there was no intramural or
There was no basketball.
No softball,
Yes.
no any sports.
Yes.
yeah,
It was sign up. In 67, I think it was another 3 other girls and I started a golf team. That was it. There was no swimming, there was no
well, the suburban
no
schools.
nothing.
Suburban schools played 6-on-6 basketball,
They did.
but the
Yes.
city schools didn't do that.
And even the city
Yeah,
schools
the
didn't even do that.
the
Just
city
all it
schools-
was. Yeah.
until I think it was 73 or 74, all they had was golf, tennis, and swimming.
Mhm.
If they had a pool, they had swimming.
Yeah.
But for the girls, that was all they had.
So this was an opportunity to get involved in extracurriculars.
Right.
Mhm.
It was.
Now,
It wasn't just a big deal at the academy. I mean, Stepperettes was really a big deal all over the city. I remember my parents taking me to Merlehaven Mall parking lot to see the Stepperettes when they came back from a competition after winning a competition.
me too. That's the
And
first
and
time I
they
found.
they performed in the parking lot at Merlehaven Mall after they came back from a competition. That was the first time I saw them, and that's when I decided I wanted to be a Stepperette.
So within the community, if we wanted to do a sport, there was girls softball, and
Yeah, she's younger than us.
and so but you had to come to a decision. Do I want to continue to play girls softball, or do I want to try out and be a stepperette? And so I always wanted to be a stepperette. So when I tried out to be a stepperette, then softball was off the table because there was no time for anything but stepperettes. I mean, I could work part time, but it pretty much consumed the time that we spent practicing or meetings. It pretty much took up our whole life. So
And that was in the rules too, that you couldn't be in any other activity.
Right. And you had to keep a certain grade point.
2 point, grade point.
And
our hair had to be a certain way.
hair had to be
Couldn't touch the collar.
your collar and had to cover your ears. And it was called the stepperette cape. And everybody had the same haircut.
And there was a financial commitment that the families all had to step up and meet as well. What was
There
what was that?
monthly dues. Can't remember how much it was.
We were
Yeah.
$2 a week. I don't know.
I think ours was 20 a month.
Okay.
But I mean, there was a small, but you're already paying for the academy too. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
And the parents, participated too. I know my dad was on the board.
my
with
mom,
Stepperette.
my mom and dad were on the board too.
and your
And my mother was one of the seamstresses.
Yeah, so did my mom had too.
And Mary's mother was one of the seamstresses. So that was the other thing. When we first joined, we were measured, and then the uniform was altered to our measurement, but we could not gain any weight, and we had to stay that measurement. And the only way it would change is if we grew vertically. Then there might be some measurements, because otherwise that was going to be our uniform for 4 years.
I lost weight when I gained. When I
Well,
joined
it's not.
Scott, what kind of requirements did they have for the guys?
Basically just the regular 60. That's clean shaven, which wasn't a problem for most of us at that point in our lives. But before they broke out the new uniforms from American Republic, the drummers just wore white shirts, black pants, and black shoes. And then once the American Republic took over the sponsorship, then that's when we changed to the black and blue uniforms, and the drummers had black and blue uniforms with the Dickie and the high-waisted pants and the cowboy boots. Um,
Yeah,
and
wear the hats too. didn't
oh
they?
yeah, we all had black cowboy hats. They went through 2 or 3 different white hats in the early stages, but the last hats that everybody had were cowboys, both for the white uniforms and the black uniforms. And you'd mentioned the funding after we separated from American Republic, we didn't have a sponsorship from anybody, so it was all self-generated funding, and a group of parents were in charge of funding, and so they had honorary Stepperettes where they'd go out and sell, like the Friends of Iowa Public Television or something like that. They'd sell a friendship to Stepperettes to a business for 100, 250, $500. You generated some money that way. We had fruit sales, which again, the parents committee took care of organizing all that. The kids had to help, or the members had to help sell the fruit. But we had oranges and grapefruits from Texas. It was great fruit. And they used to deliver it to the basement of the Bel Air Ballroom. And then we'd all go out there and drive down in there and fill up the cars and go. And then we also had cavatelli dinners via Helen and Pat's.
Helen, that's a name from the film.
The Center
Yes.
Church Kitchen. And
Yeah, the Quinn family, who were owning Helen and Pat's at that time, had a daughter that was in the Stepperettes, and so we got that time. So from roughly 70 on, they were self-supporting. We had to generate all of our own income.
So back in my day, we didn't have a board, and my mother was the chaperone, and it was great having her along with some other mothers. And we sold buttons. We went door to door selling Stepperette buttons. They were $1 a piece, and that's how we earned money.
And when you went like to South Milwaukee, did you always take like the big buses?
Big bus,
Not
yes.
school buses.
No.
Back in the 70s,
Mhm.
Paula was still in it then. They actually bought a school bus,
Oh,
and we
wow.
quit using
The Greyhound.
quit using Greyhound. And we went on a school bus,
Oh my
and then we just have a 15-passenger van, and then a truck to take like drums and equipment, because all that other stuff would go under those Greyhound buses.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that was crazy.
We got the
Poor
truck.
kids.
The truck was
It's
donated by Ruan Company. Somebody had a connection to Mr. Ruan, and they got it was a converted bread truck,
Yeah.
and
And the trips to Milwaukee, those were national competitions.
right.
And in the 60s, there was a string of
VFW.
national championships, right? You want to talk about that a little bit?
64, 65, 66. We were national champions.
And how many teams competed in Milwaukee for those
Oh my
championships?
goodness.
Was it a big deal?
Yeah, it was a big deal. It was a really big
probably
deal.
25 or 30 each year.
There was first from California. I mean,
Across the country.
Oh, yeah, across the country. And our uniforms had to be, you couldn't have a piece of lint. I mean, they would go around us and look at us up and down and make sure our skirts were all even and our boots were all, I mean, it was a big deal.
And so with the national championships, then all these offers to appear nationally flowed in, I imagine. Is that right?
Yeah, that's how we became so popular as well, because I'm sure everyone's experienced if someone heard you were a stepperette. You were a stepperette?
it's a big deal.
Well, and the travel, the thought of being able to go these exotic places that were, New Orleans, Dallas, New York.
Yeah.
The bus trips were so fun because everybody brought food and we had our own songs that we sang that were stepperette songs. And we had so much fun.
hmm
So
Kathy always had the best water in the summer in her water jug. We'd always say, Kathy, I want to have Kathy Duncan's water. So water break.
drinking habits.
I don't know, but she said I told us water. I remember I always wanted to drink
It's
her
good to be
water.
known for something, I guess. Maybe.
But we were talking, we didn't realize how famous we were because it wasn't until like later, like Maxine said, like they go, oh, you were a Stepperette or you're a Stepperette. It's like we never saw ourselves as being, big stars. We just saw ourselves as, being in this unique, drill team that was very competitive to get in, and it was honored to be in, but not realizing, how much of an honor it was as far as being
Yeah,
envied
people
by,
all the
by
way
being
from
envied by
here
other
into
people.
people. We were in St. Thomas one time and we went to a gal from a competing corps, and she's like, Stepperettes compete against you. I mean, it's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. When we had our we had a reunion. We have reunions every so often of all the corps, together. And I don't know if you guys have heard this, but we had the last one at Gilroy's, and I went in there for some dinner, and he's like, "You've had a party here," and I said, "Yeah, we did." And the waitress said that was the most fun party she's ever had. She felt like she was in a field of dreams. Oh, movies. She said, because we had videos and, all the older ladies talking about everything. And she just thought it was the neatest thing. I mean, and she had no idea what Stepperettes were.
And we had some gals from the first court.
Yeah, some of the original core.
That was awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Those first corps, I mean, they didn't get to travel
They didn't do
like
it.
we did.
They did parades,
They did a few parades and they had a few
doweling things. Yeah.
yes, but I mean, they started it all. They started the routines. They started it
Yeah,
all.
they did. They did.
They did so much.
The girls' state tournament was a huge thing for Des Moines.
Mhm.
And
Back then.
when Sharon Hansen was basketball coach, she said, "Can you get a group of Stepperettes together and do?" And she said, "I always look forward to the girls' state tournament because the Stepperettes were going to be there, and the Iwo Jima, like
Yeah.
Well, and Wayne
because-
Cooney loved the stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people saw Stepperettes there.
Yeah. In parades, a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And at golf this summer, it's right before that reunion, I went to the T-Man and I had a Dowling shirt on. He's like, "Oh, my wife went to the academy." And I said, "Oh, so did I." And he said, "She was in Stepperettes." It was close to the But it
Did you
was,
know her?
no,
No.
she worked with you.
Oh,
One of the woods. Yeah. But so hilarious. And the name is just, if you're from Des Moines, born and bred, you pretty much know.
And it wasn't limited just to your 4 years of high school. You could stay beyond?
Not really.
No?
I mean, he became the assistant director, so I helped. And I got married from Stepperettes, okay?
Right.
That's how we met.
And so he and Audrey Miller, one of the core directors had to leave during the middle of the year, and they took over as as co-directors. And so I would travel with them then, but I wasn't actually in it. I just traveled and helped with uniforms and
There were probably, from the time I joined, there were probably 6, 8, maybe 10 gals who came back the summer after their first year of college to help out, to march, to be a director, to instruct, something like that. But as far as the actual marching members on the field, it was ninth through 12th grade. And then the last year we opened it up to 8th graders also.
so as I understand, in the beginning, it was only open to seniors.
yeah.
Then when I came in '63, a bunch of seniors left and they were going into competition that summer. And so as I graduated, not graduated, but after my freshman year, it was opened up for anybody to try out because they needed bodies. So that's when, and then of course I graduated in '66, and that's when Mr. Cree left and Mr. Crocker took over. And I graduated but stayed in 1 year to help him with the transition, and he did very well.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some special member on the table. Mary, let's start with you.
I
What's your
should probably say that I met my husband, but I'm not going to say that. Because there's something that has stuck in my mind, even ever since I've been in Stepperettes. And my very first show, uh, after I joined, we were in some small town in southeast Iowa, and we marched, and it was the first show of the year for that group, and so we really couldn't have been that good, I don't think. But anyway, they had a reception after the high school basketball game. And they had cookies and stuff, and two girls were so agog, and they came and asked for my interview or my
Autograph.
autograph. And I thought to myself, oh my God, what did I get myself into? I mean, they scared me. They were like so excited. And no one's ever asked for that since. The IRS, maybe. You know, it's crazy the effect some of this had on people, but it scared me. But it was a fun. I mean, I look back, I'm like, oh, hey, how many people has this ever happened to? So that was probably one of my fondest memories.
Maxine, how about
Aside
you?
from the bus trips, like I said, and the friendships that we still have today from all these years. I mean, there was just a camaraderie and a connection that I don't think will ever leave.
A lot of bonding
A lot of
in
bonding.
those late nights on that bus.
Oh, yes. But I want to share how I got in. A girlfriend of mine, Roberta Gabriel Falvo, came to my house. We graduated St. Anthony's together, and she said the Stepperettes are going to have tryouts, and I'm not going to that. She goes, you got to go with me, please, please go with me. I said, I don't want to go, and my mom said, you go with her, just go with her. And I made it, and she didn't, and I felt horrible. I said, take my spot, except she was only like 4 foot nothing and was 5'5", so they were looking for followers. I wore glasses in those days, still do. And so Mr. Cree came over and he put his arm around me. He said, take your glasses off because you couldn't wear glasses. And, and so, yeah. And so he said, can you see 5 feet? I said, well, pretty much. He said, okay, okay. And he walked away. And anyway, I made it that day. So our first performance, my folks were there obviously and saw me squinting and took me to go touch. So anyway, that was great. I still have my tryout number in here. Let's see.
Oh, wow.
I should have said something about that. The uniformity thing. If you're like, if anything was off, you could get a tip against this competitions.
They had like a military inspection
Yeah.
before you perform.
Before you perform, we all wore the same lipstick. We all had the same haircut. Our skirts were exactly the same height off the ground. It had nothing to do with your knees. It was all about the height from the floor. And
We wore long neck panty girdles and
wear pretty pants and stuff. And then they would actually go around the back of our knees and squirt the same perfume even for every person. Honestly, I mean, you think about it. And the red, we had the same tube of lipstick everybody had to use. So everybody had the same color on. And she still has her too.
a lot of things.
I'm sorry, I interrupted Scott.
Scott?
I have a lot of memories. Uh, the friends that I made, I think, are the best. But as far as the other stuff, I think the most memorable moment was when we went to Detroit in 1968. It was when they were having all the riots in LA. They had riots in Detroit. And we were housed in the National Guard Armory in Detroit. Well, we're used to thinking of the armory off of MLK, Harding Road at the time, which is where we practiced. And we get to Detroit, and the armory is the biggest building I had ever seen. I mean, it was like McCormick Place in Chicago, triple. And we walk in, and it's all one main floor. And the first day there, we were one of only two groups there. And they were going to house all the women's groups there. Well, we had 8 drummers. So we stayed just at the far end the first night. And then as everybody else started coming in, they moved us up. And the rest of the week, the drummers slept on the firing range upstairs in the armory. And I always thought that was, they got all this stuff going on around the city and in the world at that time. And where are we? Sleeping on a firing range in Detroit.
Our sleeping bags.
Paula, what about your favorite memory or
I have two. One, my opposite is of Maxine's experience with trying out. I was an eighth grader and going into St. Joe's as a freshman, and that summer I tried out. And they broke us up into different little groups, like groups of three. And so a current core member would teach us the commands and part of a routine that we had to do. And so I was practicing all the time and all that. And I went to go try out, and it just so happened whoever that core member was taught us the opposite to go the opposite direction of the command. So the command to go right, she was teaching us under the command to for left, and vice versa. So myself and the two other girls that tried out, we didn't make it, and I was crushed because it's like, this isn't my fault. She's wrong because she didn't teach us right. And they said, well, I'm sorry, but you just didn't make it. So Carol Pissinger, who was from Sacred Heart, which is where I was from, then she saw how disappointed I was, and then offered to work with me, and so that I could try again during my freshman year, and then I made it. So that was my fondest memories, finally making it. And then the other part was when we went to Philadelphia, which was the first time that I stayed in a hotel that there were a bunch of boys that was also staying in the same motel, I should say. What did we say was the 27th Lancers, because they were drum and bugle corps. So, you're thinking about, growing up and going to an all-girls school and not seeing boys all the time until you go to this competition. So that was interesting. And then they had a drum line and we had a drum line. And I don't know if you two competed, but I know we were cheering on our drum line against their drum line. So now every time, and I work at Dally, every time I go and the drum line is practicing, I just automatically go back to cadence and think about our drum line. So I'd say the drum line's the fondest memories.
Gosh, it's hard to pick
But it is.
one memory.
It is.
What comes to mind? And I'm trying to remember for sure where it was. Um, it Drum and bugle corps. We loved to hear the drum and bugle corps in all of our competitions. They always had drum and bugle corps competitions at the same time, and I think it was. Well, it must have been Milwaukee, one of the competitions in Milwaukee. Um, um, we were all together, and somehow there were a few Cavaliers around, and and I think some of them had a crush on a couple of the gals that were in Stepperettes, and they grouped together, and their whole drum and bugle corps came together, and they serenaded the Stepperettes, and it was just amazing to hear their whole group get together and play
That's cool.
just for the Stepperette. It was very memorable.
well, modern day, the equivalent would be the Zizarettes. Is that right?
Is that right?
No.
No.
Well, yes,
The
yes,
dance team, right?
yeah,
Drill teams are now like dance teams, kind of.
yeah.
This was very military.
We miss Placencia.
Yeah. It was really military type stuff.
The the idea of an organization and youth activity and that type of thing, having young people and having a drum line and doing these different things, I think is very similar. But as far as if you put the two next to each other, there'd be a big difference in that what you actually saw.
They're wonderful.
Yeah,
I love it.
Product,
Yeah.
the product would be
Even drum and bugle corps are different.
Yeah.
Now,
And it's,
back in our day.
Stepperettes last year was 1978. So we're 47 years from that. Things change
Oh boy.
as far as that. But we still, all of us still enjoy watching that activity, even though it's changed so much.
sure.
And there aren't drill teams anymore. You're right. It's
There's
now,
no precision. Now it's dance.
now it's high school dance teams.
Yeah.
There aren't,
Precision drill teams.
yes.
You've all mentioned Mr. Cree at various times during our discussion. What can you tell me about him? It sounds like he was kind of the glue that held everything together. These at least the first few years.
He had a brilliant mind. His mind was always thinking.
And was he a teacher? What was his
No,
background?
no, he worked in a book bindery for years, and then
He taught baton, didn't he?
he taught baton on the side. But as I said, my mother was a chaperone, so he used to come over to our house, but he was always working, and I didn't stay in the kitchen with them. And he'd say, "I want you to try this step. I want to dress to the Stepperettes." And I go, so I go in the kitchen and I, do whatever he'd want me to do. But he was always thinking, and his formations were tremendous.
He was very innovative back then.
Well, he was a great motivator. He was
Yeah.
really a good motivator. Mm, yeah, I mean, really good.
He was a drum major at Drake
Right.
for 4 years.
Oh, yeah.
Right, that was his
That's
background.
right, yeah. And he lives in Wisconsin. He started a drill team up there called the Northern Step. And I don't think they were nearly as good as us, but anyway.
As long as us.
But they were also successful.
Yeah, they won some championships too. They didn't exist. I mean, the whole rudimental drill team thing, kind of
Phased out.
late.
Well, and there were a lot more activities
For
for that age group, girls especially, and even guys for the drummers. By the mid '70s, the city schools in Des Moines had basketball. Most of them had softball. There were just more activities to compete against what we had to offer.
Sure.
I talk to Mr. Cree occasionally. He's getting up there in years. It's about the Stepperettes. The last thing he said to me before we hung up was, "I've been wondering how many Stepperettes have had to have total knee replacement." Well, I'm one of them. But, he's doing okay. And then unfortunately, we lost Doug Kelso. And Mr. Crocker's still involved. I think he's
Oh, yeah.
out a little bit. And we still got Scott and Audrey. And so, yeah. And we all get together occasionally. So,
Oh, Mary said you get together for reunions.
yes, I do.
trying to come every 3 years because the early ladies are in their late 80s now. The ladies from their
mid-80s.
late 50s are in their late 80s already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a question for my fellows. Who created the routine? Because when I stop and think about all lined up in one line and we ended up all in one line, but that those different formations that we did along the way, who created those? It's just mind-boggling to think about.
Mr. Cree.
Yeah.
He did them himself. When I don't know if Doug did, Doug did them, or they just rehashes of old stuff. But
I think
when
we cut and
Audrey
pasted.
took over, we would sit in our apartment. Audrey and I would sit with the graph paper and figure it out. Who has to take 2 step or 3 steps or.
Yeah. So it was not computer generated back then. Now they have,
computer generation and all that.
they have software where you can say, okay, I've got 6 people here. I want them to be over here and I want them to do this in the middle. And you hit a button, it'll show all the moves. But
We had our graph paper, and I'm sure Dick used the graph paper too.
Or his graph paper.
Audrey and I would sit around and try to recreate something.
There was one thing that we did, and we nicknamed it the head chopper because it'd be 2 of us by each other, and one would go down on their knee, and the other one would swing around with their arm, swing around, and then come back, and then you'd come back up. So we learned real quickly that timing had to be perfect because if you came up too soon, you got your head slammed in.
Well, that
Or
was
didn't
even
go
with
down.
the flags. With hard being the Foggia ones.
Flags did that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our rifles, the rifles at our time in Stepperettes are nothing like what you see today. It's like, and what's hard for me is like I'll go and I'll watch a school, I won't name the school, but I'll watch their color guard or I'll watch the band and I'll see them twirling rifles or sabers and I'm looking at that and I thought if only they could see what the Stepperette rifles were like. Back in the day, it's like there's no comparison because I was just amazed. You had to be a certain height in order to be a rifle. You had to be a certain height to be a flag. I was too short, so I was like second from the end. But they would twirl the rifles with one hand. So it was just amazing to watch them.
Yeah, now the rifles were mostly styrofoam
In fact,
They-
they were not. They were there.
or plexiglass.
They were not real rifles. They were wooden, and we would remove some of the metal parts on them, and generally take off the trigger
Yeah,
too,
but it still
because
had
it was hard to
metal
pull them.
strap. I
Yeah.
mean, they weighed about 10 pounds. They weren't
They were heavy.
lightweight. Yeah, they were heavy. Yeah.
Kathy was awesome with the
Yeah,
flag.
she was awesome.
Hold it up, clear up in the air.
Kathy, when we were somewhere, weren't you the one who threw it across the whole Corps? For in a summer competition? I thought it was you that did.
Mm-mm.
Maybe it was Kay.
It probably was Kay.
She had a younger sister that was in. We
I had
had a
two
sister.
sisters that were
Yeah.
in. But yeah,
Her younger sister. There was a part where the whole Corps was together, all 24 of us, and she actually threw the flag over the whole Corps for that girl on the other side to catch it. Yeah.
I don't think we were throwing when Kathy was there.
The judge said, "You must be careful because if that goes higher than the American flag, you're going to have a tick." They had never seen anybody do that before, and it was real avant garde.
Yeah, you had to follow flag etiquette. 'Cause
Yeah,
a lot of those competitions were under the auspices of the VFW and the American Legion. So you had to be you had to have an American flag, you had to have it guarded properly, and you had to have proper flag etiquette throughout your whole routine, or there were major penalties.
I thought it was her, but it was probably your sister.
there were a lot of families that had 2 and 3.
Four.
Well, yeah,
They even had
siblings.
more, yeah.
Was practice after school, before school?
After school.
And so it was there on the grounds at St. Joe's?
No, it was at the Armory,
Oh,
which is now the bus barn for the city bus schools
We practiced on North High Field before
during
Yeah.
the summer. Yeah,
before it had any bleachers at all.
it was in the
Mhm.
summer. And then in the winter, it was at the Armory.
And then later we practiced um, where now the north side, the Franklin Library is,
Yeah, in the
and
70s.
next to the cemeteries.
yeah, I'm familiar with that.
So we got great tans, and we lost a lot of weight. We had to, and then that was the thing, is getting used to taking a salt pill in the summertime because of how much, sweating we were doing and perspiring and drinking water and being out in the sun. Because the practice would run like maybe 9 o'clock in the morning until maybe 5, 6 o'clock at night, depending on how close we were getting to competition and how good we were or were not, because we wanted to win. So
Yeah, even when we did these, we would do an afternoon parade. Then we'd have a picnic, sort of, in our uniform still. And then we would go and practice for 3 hours. And we'd go to the night parade and we march in the night parade. I mean, you're in this thing the whole time.
It sounds like it took up a lot of your time when you weren't in school.
It did.
It was
Well worth it.
big commitment.
Mhm.
Well, I think we're getting close to the end of our time. Is there anything else about the Stepperettes that you want to share before we sign off?
I think we learned a lot of discipline and respect and just the bonding between everybody. It was a wonderful experience. Wouldn't trade it for anything. Wonderful.
I think it developed very strong people who realized they could accomplish more than they ever dreamt they could accomplish.
and an appreciation for those that came before us within the Corps, because when we got together and saw what the creators had done, we were just amazed they had done. And then when they saw how it evolved to what we were doing, it was just like the camaraderie went between generations. It was no longer just within that particular year of class.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap up. Our guests today have been Maxine Palmer Flaherty, Mary Hooker Stearns, Scott Stearns, Paula Placencia, and Kathy Duncan Foggia. I'm Ray Blaze, and I'm going to put a plug in again for our sponsor, Friends of the Catholic Worker Fund, a 501c3 charity that supports the Hospitality Ministry of the Des Moines Catholic Worker House. So if you can send us a check or a donation, we'd appreciate it. Post Office Box 1386, Ankeny, Iowa 50021, or on our webpage with the PayPal option, friendsofcatholicworker.com. So with that, I think we'll sign off, and thank you all for participating today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ray.